Good afternoon and welcome to Recovery Talks. I'm your host, George O'Toole. Today we have a very special guest. We have Jonathan Goya, who is the coordinator of Anchor MORE program, which stands for Mobile Outreach Recovery Efforts. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, George. Thank you for having me here.
So tell me a little bit about, yourself to begin with.
Oh boy, myself. Well, I've struggled with addiction for over 10 years, and eventually I overdosed on opiates, and Narcan saved my life, and now I'm back and I'm in recovery and living life.
Awesome. That sounds like good. So before you came to Anchor Recovery, what were you doing?
So I was working on HIV prevention, doing street outreach, and I knew about Anchor and I knew about recovery coaches, and I'm a believer in peer support and peer recovery coaches, so I thought, why not take that concept of what I was doing and apply it to the recovery community specifically. Working in HIV prevention, one of the biggest barriers that we found for getting people into treatment for both HIV and hepatitis C was substance abuse. And really, until you address that issue, it's really hard to connect people to the care that they need.
Yeah.
So I decided to come on board full time and focus my effort on introducing people to recovery, engaging them in recovery.
Well, I know Anchor and the Providence Center are grateful to have you on board, and we're excited to see where this goes. I know you've been in action now for about
4 months.
4 months. So tell us a little bit about what MORE stands for, what it means and what you do.
So Anchor is a phenomenal organization that helps a lot of people. We've got the 2 drop-in centers, one in Pawtucket, one in Warwick. And we've got the Anchor ED program. And those are great services for people that are aware of them and that can walk into an Anchor and ask for help. And that's what Anchor is there for. What my program addresses is the people that don't know that help is available, don't know that Anchor even exists, and don't know that there's help available for them. So what we do is we do outreach. We do street outreach. We focus on soup kitchens, shelters, bus stops, really wherever we're needed. Anchor is a great thing, but without helping people to educating them on the resources that are available, it doesn't really do any good. So I developed the Anchor MORE program, Mobile Outreach Recovery Efforts, and what we do is we basically go into communities where recovery resources are lacking at that particular time or in that particular geographical location, and we bring the services right to them.
Well, that sounds exciting, it does, but it also sounds like it could be dangerous.
Well, we practice safety guidelines. We never go out alone. There's always teams of 2 or 4 people that go out at one time, and they're predetermined locations based on coordinated efforts on my part, whether it's doing support groups in a different community center setting, or a different church, or a different meal site, or something to that extent. We've found it to be very successful so far. We've signed up 83 people for recovery coaching in just the 4 months that we've been operating. It's really great. So, I mean, to back up a little bit, this concept came to me because I was homeless on the streets. That's where my addiction took me. And there were so many days where I knew I should, for example, go into a detox. But that phone is so heavy for people. And when a lot of the time, unfortunately, when people call detox, when they finally get the courage and strength to call, one of the biggest responses people get are, call back tomorrow. We don't have anything available. And for me, I used that as an excuse to fuel my addiction, my active addiction. And I would say, well, there's no beds available. This is why I don't try. And I would take that and I'd go back and I'd continue to use my drug of choice. So if somebody had walked by me on the street when I was there and asked me if I wanted to get into a detox and said that they would help me get into a detox, that to me, that would have been like a guardian angel coming. So that's what we do. We walk around and we identify with people on a peer level. If you had a doctor walk into Kennedy Plaza, into a bus terminal, or into a shelter and try to engage these people in conversation, most of the time they wouldn't be very receptive. They wouldn't relate or identify with that particular individual. But as us as peer recovery coaches go out, it's much easier to sit down next to somebody and say, 8 years ago I was sitting right where you're at, or whatever the case may be.
Yes.
So we really use that component of peer support to engage that individual in conversation and see if recovery is something that they're willing to participate at that moment in time. We are committed to, when somebody does reach out and ask for help and they say that they're willing to accept treatment, any form of treatment, we are committed to staying with that individual until we literally bring them to that resource.
So if I'm a person and I'm homeless and I'm strung out and I may be up to live to a new way of life, cleaning my act up, and I meet you or one of your workers, and you tell me that we'll get you into a treatment or something. I understand, and I work in the field, so I understand that it's not easy to get somebody into treatment that moment.
So it's funny, the role of a peer support recovery coach at that point in time that you're talking about, our role almost shifts, and we really become an advocate for that person, which is what I feel these people need, because unfortunately with the circumstances right now, you really do need to advocate for yourself to get access to those providers. Agreed. So we almost become advocates for them. My outreach workers have every phone number of every detox, every stabilization unit, every methadone clinic, every Suboxone provider. We have Narcan on us. We have referrals to other shelters, other soup kitchens, and 12-step meetings. So we are just walking around with a Rolodex full of information, and based upon what the person wants, we get them to that provider.
And I hate to put you on the spot here, but what's your overall opinion about medicated assisted treatment?
Well, I have my own personal experience of being on it. I've been on methadone. I think I've been to every clinic in the state of Rhode Island before the Affordable Care Act. So I've been financially detoxed many times, and I've also been on buprenorphine, on Suboxone. I believe that medication-assisted treatment can save lives if utilized properly. Agreed. That is my opinion. My experience shows that it's not often that somebody is willing to engage in a treatment plan that particular provider has, and stay on the path. It's a tough thing to deal with, but the bottom line is I do believe that it saves lives, and that it can potentially open the doors for many other avenues of recovery. Because the whole point is, right, in order for these people to get the help that they need, they have to be alive to get the help that they need. So the trick is keeping them alive long enough for them to want to live, really. That was really what it did for me, was it kept me alive long enough for me to decide I wanted to live.
Wow, that's incredible. So let me ask you next, how big is your staff and like?
So right now there's 4 of us, including me. We are the goal is to be a statewide effort, focusing on geographical locations where there are higher overdose death rates and fewer recovery resources in the community. The reality is that 4 of us could work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just downtown Providence, and we'd have our work cut out for us. Yeah. But we do reach out up to Woonsocket, down to Newport, Westerly, Providence, Cranston, on different days of the week.
And where do you see the MORE program going within the next, say, 5 years from now?
Oh, geez. Now that's putting me on the spot. I didn't think about that. Honestly, I would like, I think a problem that we face when looking at the overdose epidemic, which isn't an opiate overdose epidemic, it's a drug overdose epidemic, it's an alcohol overdose epidemic, it's an addiction epidemic. One of the biggest problems is the access to treatment, and I see the MORE program providing a bridge in that gap and people able to get linked to treatment. What happens is oftentimes when people ask for help and they reach out, they're not connected at that point in time. So there's a window of opportunity, I feel like, for people, if I'm in active addiction and I say, okay, I'll accept help, that window might only be a 15-minute window. 20 minutes later, I might completely change my mind, and the disease of addiction will get to me and convince me, give me 120 reasons like that why I should not take this opportunity, and it has. So I see my program serving as a sort of a rapid response to individuals that are willing to accept help in that point in time, and we deploy to that particular individual requesting help, and we surround him. For me, I really didn't find my way in recovery until I surrounded myself with people in recovery. I really couldn't have those people in my life that were still using, that were still drinking. Initially, I really needed to surround myself with people only in recovery, a positive network of peers. And that's what I see our program doing, is having the capability to respond to anybody in the state of Rhode Island 24 hours a day and go right to them and sit with them until they get the treatment that they need. Yeah. And beyond that, we don't just walk away at that point. We stay engaged with that individual while they're in treatment. And so we can act almost as a safety net while taking perhaps the next step in treatment. My personal story is that I had many it was a long road for me. I started in a detox. I went to, fortunately for me at the time, there was a 90-day residential facility. From there, I went from the residential facility to a recovery house for a year where I lived. So there's all these different steps that I took in my recovery. And the MORE program and recovery coaches in general, I see as acting as a net in between all of those points on somebody's journey in recovery.
So let me pull back a minute here. Let me ask you, what are the age groups that you deal with out on the streets and around?
Oh, it ranges from 18 or 19 years old up until people in their mid-60s. So there's
how about the gender and mixture?
It's a good mixture of both. Mixture. As we know, the disease of addiction doesn't discriminate. So.
And how about anybody under 18?
That we haven't encountered yet, but we do have resources available for those situations.
And I personally know that in the state of Rhode Island, there's very limited resources for juveniles.
Yes.
So if you come across this, what could you do for a juvenile? In case there's one of our audience members are out there seeing this for about a son or daughter.
So there are different resources for teens, different support groups, Alateen, for example, and of course the Anchor Recovery, the high school that the Providence Center has. So we would really base on that individual's needs. There are also other community action programs. Blackstone Valley Community Action Program does great work with youth. For us, it would really be in our best interest and the interest of the individual to link them immediately to a community-based organization that handles that particular issue. And I think that's important for us to realize that we don't specialize in everything, but we can be the bridge to the people that do. And I think that's the emphasis. And you do see it more in the summertime with youth that are homeless or runaway youth. And I do anticipate on coming across a number of those.
So if I was somebody new to the state and I'm working in here, where do you feel is the hottest spots around Rhode Island?
As far as use?
As far as the use and the homelessness and the use?
Well, of course it gravitates to Providence. Providence is really the central, and that's for a lot of reasons. Providence has the highest population
Yeah.
of any other municipality in the state of Rhode Island, so of course they're going to have higher numbers. And I also think people sort of flock to that based on the basic needs resources such as soup kitchens and shelters that are available in that particular area. So it might not be as a result of the area, it might just be that's where people are going to get the basic services that they need. But other hot spots, if you will, Central Falls and Pawtucket area are also face an epidemic, and Woonsocket particularly. But it spreads around. We see these little patches pop up. Warren, Rhode Island, for example, a small little town, had seen 8 overdoses in the last 18 months or so. So we see it pop up, and we monitor all of that, and we're responsive and reactive and proactive towards issues like that arise. And that's really what the MORE team does. It's 2 things. It's taking the show on the road. It's showing people that we come across that recovery is possible, recovery is a reality, that treatment's available. So we do that in a more steady fashion to consistently provide supports around, but we're also hoping to act as more of a response to the smaller towns that might all of a sudden come up on an epidemic within their small municipality.
So I know because you're staff and you're limited to your staff, you're not going 24 hours, 7 days a week yet.
No. Would you like the 2 in the morning shift?
But I know that's your goal.
Yes.
You would like to have 24 hours, 7 days a week, somebody available, and I think that would be awesome. That would be great. What could you do to convince the state legislators and those that give us the money to support this program? How can we convince them that it's important for the state of Rhode Island to invest in the recovery support efforts?
We did a lot of work last year with the governor's task force on overdose prevention. I think that was a really great step. The governor of Rhode Island recommended that the state legislation put aside $1.5 million for peer recovery coaches this year, and we hope to see that gets passed. Most importantly, I really think we just need to put faces with this. The great thing with doing the outreach is that there are people that I could bring you to right now that will say, those outreach workers saved my life. Because if they weren't there, I don't know where I'd be right now. And now that person might be particularly maybe they're in a residential facility, or maybe they're back home where they had originally come from, and they're getting the services that they need. So I think by not just spewing out numbers to state legislators, but hopefully getting some people to step forward and say how Anchor and how recovery coaching, how the outreach program, how the ED program had saved their life, and you really put a face to that, I think will be the driving force in people realizing that that recovery happens, that recovery works.
Yeah. I mean, and throughout the state, we have great people that support us that are in government. We have, like you said, the governor. We have Senator Whitehouse. We have Senator Josh Miller, among others, Teresa Pyro-Weave. We have Stephen O'Donnell from the state police, who's a great supporter of us, the Pawtucket Police Department, the Warwick Police Department, A.T. Wall from the Department of Corrections, and all these people are realizing that recovery is what's happening, and it's possible, and they're all seeing this. And they're all throwing their support behind us 100%.
Well, and I think that's because they've spent so much time down at Anchor to actually see it with their own eyes.
Correct. Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So I mean, all these higher state officials that are supporting us, they're not supporting us by writing a letter on the side of, on their desk. They're actually coming down there and they're seeing the magic happen. And
they're sitting with us. They're shaking our hands.
Absolutely, and it's I think the more state leaders that come down there and see for themselves what's actually happening there, the more that they'll understand why we have the support that we have.
They do, yeah, absolutely. So let's take it to another step. Now, I know you're involved with Anchor and you love the MORE program, but you're also involved with something else, the Pony program.
I am.
So, want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'm a volunteer for Miriam Hospital. They have the PONI program, PONI, which stands for Preventing Overdose and Naloxone Intervention, the only community-based organization that distributes free kits of Narcan and overdose prevention training in the community. I've been able to take both the PONI program and my work at Anchor with the outreach and merge the two, where my outreach workers are doing the volunteer work of Miriam Hospital, and that's getting kits of Narcan out into the community where they're needed. And it's great. So that's what we do. We do free trainings, whether it's one person or 50 people. You can contact us, and we can come out and do a training. We do a lot of staff trainings. It's important to educate people that are in active addiction, but more so, or equally important, is to educate the people that are around that, whether it's friends and family who have a loved one that use opiates, or staff at a shelter, or another sort of community outreach, a community drop-in center. So getting the staff trained, the people that are around the people who are using, is really key when.
And I like to tell people, at restaurants, gas stations that have public bathrooms.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I know when I was using that was those were prime hotspots for myself.
Absolutely.
As the coordinator of Anchor ED program myself, I encourage all the recovery coaches that I have to, when they go into the hospital to meet with a client, a patient, that they train and talk to every client about Narcan, what it is, what its purpose is, how to get it, and how do we get it? I mean, how does the public know how to get it?
So actually down at Anchor too, every first and third Saturday we have a PONI volunteer that does a training at 1 p.m. at Anchor in Pawtucket. And
they can get a free kit after they
can get a free
it?
kit. Yep, it only takes about 15 or 20 minutes. You can also, there are some training videos online, and also you can walk into any pharmacy, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, and go up to the pharmacist and ask for a kit of Narcan, and you can have your insurance pay for it as well. It is a very, very valuable resource. We never want it to come down to that, but that can be really for me, I'll speak for me. Having overdosed and got hit with Narcan, which I had no idea at the time what Narcan was. Waking up in a hospital bed and meeting with somebody, a peer came to visit me in recovery, very similar to the model of the Anchor ED program. Because when I woke up from an overdose, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and combining the situation of overdosing with having a supportive network of people, access to a supportive network of people, really was a pivotal point in my life where I came to a realization that I was at the end of the road and I had to find a new way to live. I couldn't use in safety anymore, and I probably wasn't going to go back to jail or back to a treatment center. I was going to die. This was really it. So the Narcan provides that sort of opportunity for intervention, if you will. And the last year, 2,200 doses of Narcan were given in Rhode Island.
Great.
So it is great. If you look at the numbers, I mean, the death toll numbers are going to be higher than 230 for 2015. But when you step back and you actually look at how many overdoses there were, that's we're doing amazing work with the use of Narcan in the state of Rhode Island, and that's community organizations, also our fire and rescue, who are carrying it.
Yeah, I know in the ED program we've seen over to date in this fiscal year we've seen over 485 people. So I mean that's imagine if Narcan and a great number of them were hit with Narcan or used Narcan.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What would have happened if Narcan wasn't available?
Yeah.
So.
And and we're lucky that we live in a state that does have access to it. Like I said, either through the Miriam Hospital PONI program or just going up to a pharmacy. That's something that in other states you can't do that in all the other states.
Yeah.
So very appreciative for the hard work that was put into that.
So out of all this, out of everything, what about Jonathan? What's Jonathan? What do you do for your own recovery?
What do I do? So as I said, I started with a 90-day residential program. That gave me the time that I needed to really start over again. And from there, I've always surrounded myself with people in recovery. That's just what I've done. I lived in a recovery house. I also did some one-on-one counseling for the first year that I was clean. And to maintain my recovery, I personally utilize 12-step programs. That really gives me it's really where I discovered my supportive network of people, and it just allowed me and afforded me an opportunity to do some work on myself that really makes me feel like a part of the world. It took me a while. You don't get clean and a week later feel life, you know. So that's where I've been able to really sort out a lot of my wreckage from the past and begin to make amends for some of it, and really just become a productive, responsible member of the community.
I mean, you're a great power example, seriously. Even to me and myself, and I hear you speak, and I hear you go around and you do all these things. You're an awesome power of example. I can't even begin to say the words that I mean by that.
Well, and there's, I think a lot of people use me as an example because I'm usually, a lot of times I do the sort of public speaking engagements, but there's a lot of power of example. You see it working at Anchor.
Yeah,
there are
absolutely.
a lot of miracles, and I think part of what we have to do as a recovery community is really encourage people to step up and say publicly that I'm a person in recovery.
Right.
And I think just doing that in and of itself will reduce any stigma attached, and
more people need to come out and be
absolutely. And it's worked. I mean, it's worked great for me in my life. It's given me a sense of purpose, and my advocacy work around all of this. So.
I mean, the greatest thing is, and I talk about, and people talk about, well, with the 12-step program, you know, it says that, you know, we have to have anonymity. That's fine, but we don't come out and broadcast our 12-step acquaintances.
There's 180 12-step programs in the country.
Right, exactly.
And I'm not telling you which one I
Exactly. And so there's so many ways, and we're just out about people in long-term recovery.
Yep.
And we get the word out there, and we show up. We do the work.
Yep, I absolutely. And for me, a part very early in the recovery, getting back to when I was finishing that 90-day treatment center, I had at the time what they called the ATR grant, the Access to Recovery grant. It paid for 3 months in a recovery house for me, which afforded me enough time to find a job and get on my feet. And if I didn't have that grant available to me, I would have surely went right back to where it was I came from, and history would have repeated itself. Absolutely. Why did I have the ATR grant? Because somebody before me came out and said, I'm a person in recovery, and here's my experience, and here's what the state needs to do, here's what the federal government needs to do. So it was through their advocacy work that allowed me a pathway into recovery through that. So I really think, for me anyway, it's getting up and speaking, saying I'm in recovery isn't about me letting you know that I'm in recovery. It's about helping the guy that's not even here yet to have the resources available for him to find his recovery or her recovery down the road.
Yep. Well, I want to thank you, Jonathan, for joining us, and I want to thank everybody else for joining us on this great day. And we hope to see you next month. If you need any information, please call 721-5100. I'm George O'Toole, and I've been your host. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.